At 0247 a.m., a Russian radar operator watched faint specks flicker across his screen and wrote them off as snow squalls rolling over the Volga. In reality, those specks were Ukrainian Lyutyi drones racing through the winter gale, small, guided kamikaze platforms, each carrying a 130-pound C4 charge aimed straight at the Veshkaima substation, a $200 million power node pushing 2.4 million kilowatts into central Russia. For generations, Russians had counted on winter as a shield, the cold and distance a natural fortress. That confidence turned into an exploitable blind spot. 2 weeks of Ukrainian intelligence had revealed a brutal truth. The substation's towers and transmission hardware, chilled to extreme temperatures, behaved more like glass than steel. Shock made them snap rather than bend. That discovery forced a brutal calculation. Lyutyi drones had a range short of the target by design. 5 craft could not simply fly 710 miles and make it back. The solution lay in aerodynamics and deception. At 2347, 5 Lyutyi took off from Ukraine, skimming terrain at treetop height to avoid look-down radars. One by one, they hugged the frozen ground, less visible to conventional surveillance and less taxed by crosswinds. The lead drone exhaled a fine aerosol trail, an engineered fog that fused the 5 signatures into a single slow-moving cloud on low-frequency radar, the start of what Ukrainian operators called the Wind Weaver Cascade. To distant radar, 5 high-threat contacts collapsed into a single harmless anomaly.
For nearly 2 hours, the gambit paid off. The drones threaded through the weather and, more importantly, they learned to ride it. Rather than fight the 35-mile-per-hour gusts, the flight control algorithms used the wind. 1,000 tiny control inputs turned turbulence into forward thrust. Fuel consumption dropped by about 30%. The impossible range began to look feasible. But radar silence can be deceit. At 0147 a.m., a Nebo-M long-range system picked up the artificial cloud. Its low-frequency sweep saw the aerosol as a mass anomaly. A concrete bunker operator near Semra didn't need a lock. He radioed a simple instruction to an S-400 battery 12 miles away: investigate. A 57E6 missile tore skyward, detonating in the cloud and shredding the aerosol. The ghost cloak ripped to pieces. One drone on the flank disintegrated in a spray of aluminum and flame. The illusion was gone. 4 hard contacts now screamed across the operator's scope. The Russians were alert. Engagement was imminent. But the Ukrainian AI had anticipated this exact turn. The 4 surviving drones banked in unison, turning 90 degrees to fly transverse to the radar's line of sight. Doppler trackers that expect radial motion suddenly saw barely any relative velocity. Targets that had been bright on the screen fell back into background clutter. The locks vanished. A multi-million-dollar targeting computer was fooled by a simple principle of physics. Horizontal motion looked like nothing.
That trick bought seconds. It also exposed the drones to thermal detection. The bunker commander demanded a better asset. 90 seconds later, an A-50 AWACS overflew the region. From 30,000 feet, its look-down infrared sensors picked out the heat of 4 small engines, like glowing embers on black ice. Coordinates slashed back down to the S-400 battery. Hard lock acquired. A missile was in the air, and this time the seeker was thermal. Infrared doesn't care about Doppler tricks. The lead drone, Pathfinder, faced a death sentence. In the cold, with a missile closing at hypersonic speed, its last gambit was engineered deception. A small pod ejected from beneath its belly. Not a magnesium flare, but a precisely tuned thermal decoy designed to burn at the same temperature as the drone's engine. Pathfinder throttled down, dimming its signature, and then dove unpowered, becoming a glider that used the fierce Volga wind to drift low and silent. The missile seeker now saw 2 identical heat glows. It chose the decoy. The warhead detonated in a blinding flash. For a heartbeat, the Russians celebrated. Seconds later, the real drone reignited, climbed, and vanished back into the night as if resurrected. Every layer of the Russian defense had been peeled away. The path to Veshka lay open. At 0247, Kyiv gave the single terse order, engage. The 4 drones converged on the Veshka substation's 500 kilovolt junctions with mathematical precision. Their shaped charges were not set to detonate on contact. They were timed, 0.8 seconds delayed, so the blast would arrive once the charges nestled within the brittle, frozen joint. At 0 degrees Fahrenheit, steel doesn't bend, it shatters. The delayed burst turned shock into glass-breaking force. Massive pylons that usually flexed under load fractured and snapped. Lines that once hummed with 500 kilovolts split like dry wood. No long dramatic blaze, just the sudden, catastrophic silence across the grid.
The visual was surreal. 2 blinding eruptions, tongues of flame 30 feet high, and then a blackout. 500 megawatts vanished in an instant. Tens of thousands of homes and critical facilities in Yulian, Cordovia, and Shavash were plunged into freezing darkness. Fire crews and electrical engineers scrambled, but for hours the substation would be more crater than power plant. Starlink imagery hours later showed a 20-foot crater and snapped conductors like toothpicks. The operational effects cascaded. Command nodes relying on stable power went quiet. Encrypted networks blinked offline. Radar arrays lost calibration. Artillery batteries that depended on grid power to run fire control and heating for ammunition fell silent. Ukrainian forces exploited the lull. Advances measured not in grand charges, but in methodical 5-mile gains across a stunned front in under 48 hours. Convoys jammed, tanks idled, logistics snarled. An ammunition plant in Kyivoshia stalled for 3 days when its climate controls and assembly lines froze. Kremlin panic was predictable. Commanders ranted about how drones reached so far, but the lesson was technical. Ingenuity beats brute mass. The Wind Weaver Cascade had turned winter, the Russian blessing, into an ally. The drones had ridden the storm, used aerosol deception, Doppler geometry, thermal decoys, and milliseconds of timing to break a backbone asset. What cost Moscow a blackout was 5 relatively inexpensive platforms and an audacious plan.
By dawn, the human fallout was visible. Sirens, crowds without power, frozen substations, tanks curled like beetles without fuel. By mid-morning, analysts confirmed what satellite data hinted at earlier. The Veshka node was gone, and the ripple would affect frontline operations for days. Social feeds filled with footage of the flashes in the darkened cities. Official statements were evasive and clumsy. International observers called it a paradigm moment, a small, cheap strike delivering strategic shock. For Ukraine, it was vindication. A few $1,000s worth of kit had created a cascade: command disruption, artillery silence, logistics paralysis, and a morale blow. The Lyutyi drones had not only struck hardware, they'd shattered an assumption that geography and climate made some targets untouchable. The next lesson for strategists was immediate. If a grid can be broken like glass, the rules change. Power is a weapon. Its loss is a multiplier. If you had to pick the next target, ammunition plant or tank depot, what would you choose? The comment threads filled in 1,000 tactical answers, each one proof that the age of small, smart strikes had arrived. The night over the Volga closed with the glow of emergency fires and the quiet hum of Ukrainian operators cataloging telemetry, a data set that would inform future missions. Moscow's lights had gone out, so had part of its confidence. The Wind Weaver Cascade had shown how a storm can be ridden, how physics can be weaponized, and how, in modern war, the smartest tactic often wins. If you support tactical ingenuity, hit like and subscribe, because the next time lights go dark, someone will want to know how it happened.